January 2025, California. A scene of utter devastation. Wildfires tore through the southern part of the state, leaving a trail of destruction. Homes were reduced to ash, families displaced, and the landscape scarred and blackened. The January 2025 wildfires were a wake-up call for California and the world. They exposed the vulnerabilities of our infrastructure and the inadequacy of our disaster preparedness. In the aftermath, there was a renewed focus on climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. Lawmakers passed sweeping legislation aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting renewable energy. Out of the ashes emerged a stronger, more determined state, committed to a sustainable future. Deep in the heart of the climate crisis lies hydroclimatic whiplash. This phenomenon is characterized by extreme swings between wet and dry periods. In the months leading up to the infernos, Southern California experienced unusually heavy rainfall. Vegetation flourished, but this exuberance of life was short-lived. As quickly as the rains arrived, they vanished. The sun beat down, baking the moisture from the soil, turning lush vegetation into tinder-dry fuel. This abrupt shift set the stage for a disaster of epic proportions. The abundant vegetation, fueled by earlier rains, became a vast, dry tinderbox awaiting a spark. The deluge brought a false sense of security. People looked at the overflowing reservoirs and lush greenery and breathed a sigh of relief. But scientists and fire experts knew better. The drought that followed was relentless, baking the earth dry. Vegetation withered and died, transforming from vibrant green to brittle brown. The land was parched, the vegetation a tinderbox, and the stage was set for disaster. All that was needed was a spark. As the drought tightened its grip, the risk of wildfires soared. The dry vegetation provided ample fuel, and the hot, dry air created perfect conditions for ignition. The slightest spark could ignite a conflagration. Scientists have long warned that climate change would lead to more extreme weather events, including wildfires. The 2025 California wildfires stand as a grim testament to the impact of climate change. The Earth's climate is changing at an unprecedented rate, primarily due to greenhouse gases from human activities. This warming effect has wide-ranging consequences, including more frequent and intense wildfires. The fires served as a wake-up call, a desperate plea from a planet in peril. Climate change is disrupting established weather patterns. In California, it has manifested as a dangerous tango between deluge and drought. The rains, when they come, are often more intense, creating a surge of vegetation growth. This boom and bust cycle creates ideal conditions for wildfires. The 2025 California wildfires were a tragic example of this dangerous cycle. The 2025 California wildfires were a wake-up call for a state accustomed to nature's fury. They exposed the vulnerabilities of California's infrastructure and highlighted the need for more resilient communities. The fires underscored the urgent need to address climate change. California has long been a leader in the fight against climate change, but the fires were a call to action. The new abnormal requires a shift in mindset from complacency to urgency. The 2025 California wildfires were fanned into a frenzy by the Santa Ana winds. These winds, often referred to as devil winds, descend from the high deserts, gathering speed and heat. The Santa Ana winds are a product of the region's unique geography and atmospheric conditions. In January 2025, the Santa Ana winds arrived with a vengeance, coinciding with tinderbox conditions. The winds turned the already volatile situation into a full-blown catastrophe. The Santa Ana winds transformed the landscape into a fiery tempest. Flames whipped into a frenzy, consumed everything in their path. The strong winds made it nearly impossible for firefighters to contain the blaze. The winds picked up burning embers, creating new spot fires miles away. The Santa Ana winds turned a manageable wildfire event into an unprecedented catastrophe. The Santa Ana winds, with their hot, dry breath, fanned the flames of the 2025 California wildfires into a conflagration of epic proportions. They turned what might have been a series of localized fires into a massive, fast-moving inferno that swept across the region, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Homes were reduced to ashes, businesses were destroyed, and lives were lost as the wind-driven flames consumed everything in their path. The winds created a perfect storm for wildfire, exacerbating the already dangerous conditions created by the preceding hydroclimatic whiplash and years of human negligence. They turned the dry vegetation into a tinderbox, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. They carried embers for miles, starting new fires that quickly grew out of control, overwhelming even the most valiant efforts to contain them. The 2025 California wildfires were a stark reminder of the destructive power of the Santa Ana winds, a force that has shaped the region's landscape and history for millennia. They are a reminder that even in the face of technological advancements and human ingenuity, nature's fury can still humble and devastate. The Santa Ana winds, a natural phenomenon that has always been a part of California's climate, have become increasingly dangerous in recent years as climate change exacerbates their effects. The hotter, drier conditions created by climate change provide the perfect fuel for the Santa Anas, turning what was once a manageable force into a potent engine of destruction. While the 2025 California wildfires were ignited by a complex interplay of natural forces, the human factor loomed large in the unfolding disaster. Years of decisions, both large and small, had created a landscape primed for conflagration, a tinderbox awaiting a spark. From inadequate infrastructure to lax building codes and a history of poor forest management practices, the human toll of the fires was as much a story of neglect and short-sightedness as it was of nature's fury. The fires exposed a systemic failure to adapt to the realities of a changing climate, a failure to heed the warnings of scientists and fire experts who had long predicted more frequent and intense wildfires in a warming world. The fires were a stark reminder that we do not live apart from nature, but within it, and that our actions or inaction have consequences. The human factor was evident in the way homes were built in fire-prone areas, often without adequate defensible space or fire-resistant materials. It was evident in the aging power grid, vulnerable to sparks that could ignite dry vegetation, and in the lack of investment in forest management practices that could have reduced the risk of catastrophic wildfires. The 2025 California wildfires were a tragedy of epic proportions, but they were also a wake-up call, a stark reminder that we must do better. We must learn from our mistakes, adapt to a changing climate, and make the investments necessary to protect our communities from the growing threat of wildfires. The time for complacency is over. The time for action is now. Section 2. When infrastructure fails. The 2025 California wildfires exposed the vulnerabilities of a state grappling with aging infrastructure and the growing challenges of climate change. The fires laid bare the consequences of underinvestment in critical systems, from water management to power grids, revealing a systemic fragility that turned a natural disaster into a man-made catastrophe. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, tasked with providing water to millions of Southern Californians, found itself at the center of controversy as the fires raged. The Santa Ynez Reservoir, a key source of water for the region, had been empty since February 2024, a full year before the fires due to a combination of drought and what critics called mismanagement. The lack of water not only hampered firefighting efforts but also raised questions about the LADWP's preparedness for a major wildfire event. Lawsuits were filed against the LADWP, alleging that the agency had failed to adequately prepare for the known risks posed by the Santa Ana winds and the increasing likelihood of wildfires. The lawsuits claimed that the LADWP had prioritized other uses for the water in the Santa Ynez Reservoir, such as hydroelectric power generation, over the critical need for fire suppression. The LADWP's woes were just one example of how infrastructure failures exacerbated the 2025 California wildfires. The aging power grid, vulnerable to wind damage and prone to sparking, played a role in igniting several of the fires. Roads and bridges damaged by the fires hampered evacuation efforts and delayed the arrival of firefighters and emergency responders. The fires exposed the fragility of California's infrastructure, highlighting the need for significant investment and a renewed focus on resilience in a changing climate. Section 3. A Trail of Sparks. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection estimated that over 95% of past California wildfires were ignited due to human activity. The 2025 fires were no exception, with a trail of human-caused sparks igniting the tinderbox conditions created by natural forces. Downed power lines, sparking equipment, and carelessly discarded cigarettes were among the leading causes of the fires. In one instance, a car with a dragging chain sparked a brush fire that quickly spread into a raging inferno, fueled by the dry vegetation and driven by the Santa Ana winds. The fires highlighted the need for greater public awareness about wildfire risk and the importance of taking precautions to prevent ignitions. Simple actions such as clearing brush around homes, properly maintaining vehicles, and being careful with fire during dry conditions can make a significant difference in reducing wildfire risk. The 2025 California wildfires were a tragic reminder that we all have a role to play in preventing wildfires. By being aware of the risks, taking precautions, and being responsible stewards of our environment, we can help protect our communities from the devastating consequences of wildfire. Section 1. The Long Road to Recovery. The January 2025 California wildfires left an indelible scar on the Golden State, a stark reminder of nature's destructive power. Fueled by hydroclimatic whiplash and the Santa Ana winds, the fires consumed millions of acres, destroyed homes, and claimed lives. The air was choked with smoke, a constant reminder of the devastation. The enormity of the loss was difficult to comprehend. The landscape was transformed into a desolate moonscape with charred remains of trees standing amidst the ashes. Families huddled in shelters, their faces etched with grief and uncertainty. The economic impact was staggering, with billions in damages and lost revenue. The road to recovery was long, a testament to human resilience. From the ashes emerged stories of courage and compassion. Neighbors helped neighbors, and communities came together to rebuild. The fires revealed the best of humanity, demonstrating hope and solidarity. The wildfires were a stark reminder of the growing threat posed by climate change. Amidst the devastation, there was hope for a safer, more sustainable future. The fires were a wake-up call, urging action against the challenges of a warming world. Section 2. Preventing the Next Inferno. The January 2025 California wildfires were a harsh wake-up call, reminding us of our changing climate. As global temperatures rise, driven by human activity, we see more extreme weather events, including wildfires. Preventing the next inferno requires a shift in our relationship with nature. We must invest in climate change mitigation, reduce fossil fuel reliance, and transition to renewable energy. Sustainable land management and resilient infrastructure are crucial. The wildfires can be a catalyst for change, a turning point in our relationship with the planet. We have the knowledge and resources for a sustainable future, but it requires collective effort. The time for action is now. The future of California and the planet depends on it.